The last several months have been hard, to say the least. Widespread stay-at-home orders, coupled with continued social distancing, have made 2020 an especially isolating year. With all of the ups and downs, it's important, however, to remember that this current reality pales in comparison to the devastation and terror millions of people faced during the Holocaust. For years, Jews and other persecuted minorities across Europe were forced into hiding in order to escape death. They hid in tiny apartments, attics, under floorboards, anywhere that was safe. Imagine living in a 10 by 15 foot space with no windows and no ventilation for 3 straight years. With little to break up the time, each day blended into the next. Erwin Geismar was one of these millions of people entangled by the Nazi regime. He wrote a 49-page memoir while hiding in an apartment in Amsterdam in the Netherlands that was owned by a German woman, Erika Heyman. Erwin was a Dutch Jew but originally immigrated from Germany. Before the war, he owned a factory that produced leather goods. He'd travel for business and enjoyed learning about the latest trends in fashion and design. But once World War II gripped the continent and German forces took control of the Netherlands in May of 1940, Jews in the country were forced to follow new, strict decrees.
Everything from those that are more known, like having to wear the Jewish star and Jewish children not being able to go to public school anymore, to not being able to associate with your non-Jewish friends or not being able to ride your bikes or listen to a radio. So everything was slowly taken away, and eventually they were completely restricted from public life.
That's Daphne Geismar, granddaughter of Erwin Geismar and author of the new release, Invisible Years, a family's collected account of separation and survival during the Holocaust in the Netherlands. Geismar says that in the early years of the German occupation in the Netherlands, her grandfather helped in any way that he could.
He worked for the Committee for Jewish Refugees, helping German Jews who had fled Germany to the Netherlands with relief services.
Sadly, Daphne Geismar was never able to meet her paternal grandfather. Just 2.5 months into hiding in 1943, he was discovered and sent to Auschwitz, where he was murdered. Geismar says that her grandfather and other Jews taking refuge at Heyman's place were found after somebody reportedly tipped off German police.
There was also a man that everyone refers to as the barber, and he apparently came to the apartment and gave Erwin a haircut, but he was also supplying coupons for food rations because it was very difficult to get food and you needed coupons, and Jews in hiding, of course, no one could know they existed, so they couldn't have coupons. So there was this whole black market for food coupons, and this barber was providing food coupons and getting money for that. And then apparently that line of being able to supply that dried up. And both Dieter Heyman and my father have said that it was the barber who was supplying the food coupons who turned them in.
Geismar estimates that at the time, the barber would have received around $26 from the Germans for turning in a Jew. That was apparently the going cost for a human life. While Erwin did not survive in hiding, his wife and son were able to get to safety and create new lives after the war.
My grandmother, my father's mother, actually had a false identity card and hid in plain sight working as a maid for a non-Jewish family. And so she was doing that, and my grandfather, Erwin, was hiding with Erika Heyman, and my father was hiding in a wallpaper factory behind the train station in Amsterdam, but some work had to be done in the factory, so another hiding place had to be found.
Erwin's son and Daphne's father, Daniel, was in a precarious position in the spring of 1943. Just a young teen during that time, he was stopped by the Nazis while traveling to his next hiding spot.
A resistance worker came to get him, to take him to a new hiding place. So he's 13 years old at this time, and they were picked up by the Nazi police as they were getting on their bikes to go to another hiding place, and they were interrogated and beaten for quite some time. And then it was a holiday, and they wanted to send them to sort of the next level of interrogation. And they said, we're going to send you home and come back on Monday because everything's closed. And so they left, and the woman said, well, I can't take you to your hiding place now. And so my father went home to where his parents were. His father hadn't left yet to go into hiding, and there was nowhere at that point for my father to go. So he went into hiding with his father at this apartment owned by Erica Heyman. And he was there for about 3 weeks, and his father was really concerned because there was a lot of people in the apartment, and there was a lot of people coming and going. Erwin was concerned that it just wasn't safe enough. I don't know why he didn't or couldn't make arrangements for himself to leave also, but he made arrangements again with the underground.
After a short period of living with Erwin, Daniel was transported to a more secure shelter in the northern rural Netherlands. This decision saved Daniel's life, but not many were so fortunate. By the end of the war in May of 1945, there were less than 50,000 Dutch Jews and German Jewish refugees left alive in the Netherlands. Before the war, this population was 155,000 people. Part of this lucky group were Daphne Geismar's maternal grandparents. They spent 2 full years, from 1943 to 1945, hiding in a church attic with other Jews in the city of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. There were no windows, lights, or heating in the attic, and it was extremely tight space. Despite the hardships, however, they soldiered on.
They built a second hiding place, made a second hiding place habitable on the other side of the organ pipes. So there were 2 hiding places, and this cavernous roof sort of connected them so the 2 families could actually hear each other, which was actually kind of critical when in 1945 there was a raid on the church. And they were able to communicate. Was one of many pieces of incredible luck that saved their lives.
In the 2 years they spent living in the church, there were some opportunities to leave the attic and soak in a few moments of normalcy.
They were at times able to leave the hiding place. There was the room that the organist would sit in right underneath the hiding place, and often they could go there to leave the attic to read or to have a meal and then go back into the attic space. Now and then, on days where the church was completely closed, they could go to the apartment of the caretaker so that they had a change of environment.
Geismar points out that there were many different experiences in hiding, and often entire families were ripped apart, spending years away from each other.
My mother was hidden with an older woman and her daughter, who was a young adult, and with 3 other Jewish children who were not connected or related to my mother. And there was this remarkable woman named Riek Dekkers, who was a friend of the Reverend Brillenberger-Worth, who was a nurse, and she took it upon herself to bring information and letters back and forth between my grandparents and my mother and her sisters, so these 3 girls who were 9, 10, 11 when they went into hiding. And there's a little fragment of a note that my mother made with a drawing on one side and a note to her parents on the other side, where she's describing the bedroom that she slept in. And she's clearly trying to let her parents know. She doesn't want her parents to worry, and she's clearly trying to let them know that it's okay.
For Geismar, reading the writings of her family during this time opened up a new world. Growing up, she says her parents, grandparents, and other family members never really openly discussed what happened during the Holocaust. Much of the remaining mementos and stories were tucked away in a dusty cabinet. It wasn't until later in life, when Geismar visited the church in Rotterdam, that she started understanding the full scale of what her family endured. Now, in her book, the voices of 9 narrators are showcased through individual written accounts found in diaries and letters. These first-hand experiences of the war and its aftermath are mixed in with narrative text, photos, and historical briefs that tie the book together. You can find the title Invisible Years on Amazon.com or request a copy to be stocked at your local bookstore. To find out more about Daphne Geismar and all of our past guests, visit viewpointsradio.org. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price.
Now there's even more reason to get flu and pneumonia shots. They may help cut the risk of Alzheimer's disease. Studies reported at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference 2020 show that flu vaccination, especially at a younger age, may cut Alzheimer's prevalence by 17%. And getting a pneumonia vaccine between age 65 and 75 may reduce Alzheimer's risk by up to 40%. Dr. Maria Carrillo is Chief Science Officer of the Alzheimer's Association.
Vaccines are at the forefront of public health discussions today, and these new studies suggest that their benefit goes beyond preventing viral or bacterial infections. If these findings can be confirmed in larger and more diverse groups, then taking care of your health by getting vaccinated may also lower your risk of Alzheimer's and other dementia.
What's more, growing research is investigating whether infections themselves might worsen or even cause dementia. Find out more at alz.org.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows. And find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.
Coming up on Viewpoints.
Too many people are going to Europe with a selfie stick and an Instagram agenda, and they're not even connecting with the culture and the people, and they're not even changing. Travel should change you. That's a beautiful thing.
Making the most of your getaway once it's safe to travel again. Then,
nobody has definitively answered whodunit.
The 1896 murder that echoes through modern law. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.